then that leaves an energy value, and this includes O&M. So there's operations and maintenance that has to be taken care of, and that has to be taken into consideration long term. And when we come to you with the CISA, that is inclusive. So this does take into consideration a 2% inflation rate, and but there's a lot of value there between 8 and 30 years. But that is a gross value of the energy, so you have to take your project cost out of that. So we're getting close on our time here. I think Lonoke's benefit at the end of the day is you can be a leader in the renewable energy efforts. I think big picture, it provides long-term stability of your energy costs, and we know we're going to have the structures and facilities that we have in town for the next 30 years. We need to, this is a good opportunity. It could provide additional financial resources for the city of Lonoke when we get into the later years, for sure. So there's a couple things that are cut off there, one or two, but there's a performance guarantee. So one of the things like that when I've talked with individuals about this, the first thing is, how do I know that thing's going to work? And there's performance guarantees that would be put in place to from a contractor, from our standpoint, to say this is a baseline that it will produce this as we do this. That's what a performance guarantee is. Operations and maintenance, we've already discussed that some. There is maintenance that has to be taken care of, and there'll be inverters that go out, and there'll be things that happen over time, but we have that built into our budget, or will have. So the one crucial thing is a buyout option or a long-term lease. We've got to figure out what direction we want to go for that. There's equipment warranties, 25 years on panels, 10 years on the inverters, 5 years for some of the other stuff. There's 5-year workmanship warranties on everything, and then we would carry insurance on top, for tornadoes or anything like that might happen. We would have to carry insurance to cover those things. But these panels are unbelievably sturdy. What is the panel size and wind speed, Bill?
54 mile an hour, 1 inch hailstone is the norm.
So they're
industry standard.
They look pretty thin and out there, but they're pretty sturdy. And we would one of the things that Bill helped us do is really focus on top tier products with that knowledge that he's gained over the years, and making sure that we're only getting the best of what's out there. Panels and inverters specifically. So that's really it. I think we're about there on time. So the next step, or we've got to figure out what y'all would like to do, and we would sure like a chance to get into the details of the billing for the previous 12 months, and I think we can give you really top business once we have that and sit face to face and kind of have discussions on what's best for the city of Lonoke.
And can I add some context to that process real quick? Tonight is about education, so the council understands what ESCOs are, what they're providing, kind of good information that they gave us tonight. We go through an RFQ process, and we're going to have hopefully Budget and Finance Committee and some guys from 2022 on the infrastructure group sit down and vet submissions that came through an RFQ process, and that's when they're going to go into more deep dive. You've heard him say a lot, these are preliminary numbers. That's because it costs them time and money to go deep diving into our numbers. That's why that 220 is an estimate tonight. And so as we get further down the road, we're going to get more and more specified in how much energy savings we're talking about, and that's what that's the ultimate goal is to release an RFQ, get submissions, vet the submissions, and then ultimately have the Budget and Finance Committee present a recommendation to you guys, the city council, on how we should proceed forward.
For clarification with you guys, it's just, we're talking about what we talked about tonight, not necessarily the swapping LED light bulbs out and all the other energy efficiencies that we might pick up around the.
I would say it would be a good idea to bundle those things together.
And we've got a group that we work with and
Okay.
visited with that is more in that realm. But if y'all are interested in a package, we can definitely do that.
Okay. And that would probably be lined out in our RFQ, exactly what we.
You guys line it up real quick. You guys hang out for 10 minutes if you need Q&A with them. I'll get them set up.
Do we have, Trey, do we have time for 5 minutes before we start the next one, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna get these guys. I gotta get them loaded on the drive so they have their presentation as well. So I'll just.
What kind of coordination needs to take place with Entergy?
So energy, it's kind of like the waltz with them. You have a procedure that you start with, and then and it's just as simple as turning paperwork over.
And one thing, I'm not real happy with our streetlights right now.
Yeah.
We have old technology, and half of them don't work. Or mine it comes on for 20 seconds and it's off for 40 seconds. So and I know, it's my understanding that Entergy owns our streetlights, and we pay them X dollars per light basically each month.
Yeah.
Could that be negotiated? I'm kind of talking to y'all as much as I am y'all. Is that kind of stuff negotiated as we get into net metering?
No, not really. When you really get down to what that would be more on the other side with some of the energy efficiencies maybe. I'm not sure about
Okay.
that. It's really, there's I know there's other things that go on in Lonoke, too, power outages and such that there's upgrades that are going on I know of, but this really doesn't address that type of thing.
The operations and maintenance, y'all cover that before the buyout, is that right?
We will, yes, we cover that, and that's part of what we have budgeted in.
It's built into the numbers, the bush hogging, the insurance to cover everything, the lease for the land, long-term lease, all that's built in. And it's taken out before we show the net savings. So rates of returns and all of that.
And
Count all the costs first.
then if we buy it out, then we're responsible.
You would take that over and, or you could have a contract and we would continue.
Yeah, so that would be an option.
Yeah.
So we could buy it out, but just hire you as an independent contractor
Okay. Right,
to
right.
maintain it for us,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It keeps it a little cleaner. We came in prepared to do that.
Do you find many people that just, let's gravel it?
It's something that we considered out here, but at the end of the day, it wasn't worth it. Yeah.
I've looked at all kinds of things like, how can you continue to maybe take some agricultural benefit out of it as well? I went to one webinar and it turns out, well, you just put them way off the ground, so, and that wasn't very feasible because the structure requirements went through the roof.
We built one in Camp Robinson, and one of the pitches was, listen, we're gonna make pollinator type, we're gonna put
Yeah.
pollinator type stuff so we can harvest bees and honey and all that.
And sheep, they use sheep a
Yeah.
lot, and just have them really.
We just end up fencing it and graveling it for
Yeah.
a
And if
long
you've
term.
been by the array, there's room between to do something, but it would have to be kind of a boutique farming of some sort, maybe heirloom tomatoes or some high-priced.
To maintain Bermuda, you'd still be spraying, at least once, maybe twice a year. So it's kind of a toss-up, but at the end of the day, I've kind of nixed it on this project that we've done before. When you really got to looking at the number of
Just so you'll know, my company name is Stellar Sun. And I started my company in Little Rock in 1976 doing solar hot water. And I bought my first PV modules in 1980. And I have grown up with this industry. I carry a national certification.
He's
And,
number two, right?
Yeah, there's a national certification. There's thousands of people in the field, and I got mine the very first time it came out, and my badge number is 2.
That's awesome.
So there's the experience, but, you know, for the purpose of coming together and, you know, basically, you know, Bill has a wealth of knowledge, and I really don't know how I'm involved, but Don has land, and, you know, so I've kind of have been involved. I managed the project out there for him, is how I got involved, so.
Yeah.
But that was with a different company, correct?
No, that was with all three of us working separately on that project, and we've had opportunities to go to other individuals and companies, outside of that project together, but we haven't created a business together yet.
We are, you know, we woke up and said, well, we ought to start a business and put large-scale solar facilities in. And we all agreed that was a great idea, but we haven't actually formed the business. We've been working as project team members. So we have our own autonomy, but yet we come together to do projects. And so we're probably over this.
Bids for other cities, large scale, like 80 megawatt systems. So we've worked together on things like that. So it's not foreign for us by any means.
And I'd say probably one of the reasons we haven't is because until this year with the new law,
I mean,
it
things
didn't make
change.
sense for cities because there was a 30% tax credit that nobody got to take advantage of to keep the cost down a little bit. And so cities are all.
Without it, it's a no-go.
Yeah, so it, you know, it took it to a 20-year payback period instead of maybe 8.
Greg, the buyout option, that's like system buyout, but not land buyout, is that correct? Land would be a long-term lease?
We'll have to talk about that as it moves forward. We're not talking about large acreage, you know, this is, you know, 5 to 6 acre, deal. So we've got it figured as a long-term, lease right now.
Because if you're.
It is built into the O&M cost. And so if we had a contract to extend that part of it,
Their own land,
the
put
lease
it
would
on.
just
Or the
stay
city
with
bought that
the
land.
Yeah, I mean, that's an option.
You know, the guys that are here now.
So you only need
Thank you.
5 to 6
Thank you very much.
acres
Just wanted
to
to
erect the
say hi to this
panels
fellow over here.
to produce enough energy for the city,
Good to see you.
correct?
Hey.
Okay.
All right, yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Appreciate y'all. Look forward to
Thank
visiting.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, let me see if I can do this without making much noise. Rick, come on back. I'll bring up your presentation.
This is just that fifty cents on what Bill says, what I think.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, this is Rick Vance.
Hi.
Rick's from Integrity. Very similar presentation tonight in terms of information.
Rick, do you have any cards?
Absolutely.
This is good, I think.
Would y'all fill on the pass?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
I've
you.
spoke with y'all before.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Back again. Oops. Anybody else interested in a card?
You're welcome to some of my papers.
Y'all city council?
We got your card already.
All right. How's it going? Yeah. How are you? Good. see you.
Rick, I'm gonna leave
Okay.
the mouse over here. If you'll scroll and wheel, that'll run your slides for you.
Okay.
And then, if you don't mind, for folks online here, you don't have to talk directly
Okay.
into it, but if you're somewhere close to it.
Testing, yeah. I'm a pretty loud dude, regardless, so this might make it a little louder. I think obviously y'all all know why we're here. You guys are considering putting out an RFQ for energy savings or for ways to save the city money that you're already spending. We've looked at some of that opportunity for you guys at a very high level. But we definitely think it's worthwhile that you pursue at least requesting the qualifications. And I want to kind of walk you through that process so you can understand what you're getting into. You can understand that process and ask questions before you do that, before you do an RFQ. So real quick, let's just talk about, I'm going to say ESPC a lot, but that's Energy Savings Performance Contracting. It's a law. It's legislated by the state of Arkansas, and it's really a tool for you guys. I'm going to talk about that, some of the benefits for the city, and then the actual RFQ itself. Feel free to ask questions while I'm going through this. I want to try to move through it quick and allow you guys time to talk and ask questions. Real quick about us, I know I've talked to you guys in the past. The last time I was here, the room looked a lot different. But we were talking about solar. Solar is definitely a part of this conversation, but it's just one part. So I want to get into some of the other things you can do with this tool. But we as a company, we specialize in optimizing building performance. We know how facilities operate, all kinds of facilities, and we know how to add value by providing services that optimize the performance and ultimately save you money on utilities, on maintenance, on capital planning. We can do anything from a simple LED retrofit, which you guys have done here, to a complex, comprehensive energy savings projects with multiple measures across the state, all the way to solar. So we do a lot related to facilities. We also do a lot with public entities. These are our public numbers. Coming up a little funny here, but 55 projects. So cities, counties, school districts, state agencies, non-federally taxed entities, public entities like you guys who can take advantage of that tool. We've worked with many of them. To date, completed over 83 million, saving over 10 million guaranteed savings annually for those entities. So let's talk about this project type or this tool. Energy savings performance contracting. Really, it's a state law that allows public entities like the city to enter into contracts where you have no capital upfront costs. The savings projected by the ESCO is guaranteed, and that means that the project will pay for itself, right? So the job is to find where you're spending money now, find ways to reinvest that money in a manner that they're going to pay for themselves or generate positive cash flow for the city. So again, it can be a very, very simple project. Go do LED where you haven't done it yet. That could be one of the projects, and you guys have some opportunity there. Or it could be a lot more comprehensive, looking at all the ways you currently spend money and finding ways to reinvest it. So why? One, we've got a lot of really good technology available. For a city like Lonoke, you have multiple facilities. Those facilities have different technologies, different conditions of those technologies. Some of your facilities operate differently from others. And there's a lot of different technologies that can be looked at to create not only efficiency and thus lower utility costs, but also to create operational costs. So money you're spending now on maintenance or repairs or otherwise how you're operating that facility, those are savings that can be captured by improved technologies. LED is one of those. Solar is one of those. High efficiency HVAC and HVAC controls, those are all kind of high efficient technologies. It's never been lower cost to install this stuff now. Anything from, again, just all through the building, all your service systems, lighting, HVAC controls, solar, all sorts of ways you run your facilities, implementing those technologies have never been cheaper. Then typically you finance these projects through some kind of public debt instrument, and rates right now are really low. So you can get low cost, high efficient technologies at cheap money. And then also operational costs are rising all the time. Not only do utility rates creep up, but the cost to maintain certain equipment, materials creep up, labor creeps up. There are costs associated with operating your facilities that are always rising. And then available financial incentives. You still can get utility rebates for some of this work. You also can take advantage of a tax credit. We talked about that last time with solar, but there's a free money out there to do these types of projects that can be bundled in. So let's talk about the savings categories. You'll hear energy savings performance contracting, energy savings performance contracting. That's just one of the buckets, really. So that's the kind of the easy bucket to define. It's what are you spending on your electric bills, your gas bills, your water bills. You could throw things like phone and data in here. You could throw things like gas to run your vehicles. But anything you're spending on a fuel or energy goes in that bucket. Pretty easy to tell what that is. You guys always have bills for this stuff. We can see those. We can add those up. The other one's maintenance. This is kind of backwards looking. What have you historically spent to maintain and operate your facilities? What's it costing you to buy lamps or ballasts or motors or compressors or pumps? What systems are you incurring maintenance costs, fleet management maintenance costs? And it's kind of backwards looking. What are you spending that money on? How can we reinvest it to save? And then capital costs.
See the speaker above your head? I got you.
Okay. Capital cost avoidance. That's kind of forward looking. What are you planning on spending money on? What do you need to upgrade? What equipment is past its useful life? What other capital plans do you have that you know you need to address? If we can put those in a project now, there's savings to be captured from that, and that's part of the savings bucket. Here's what we want to do with all those savings. This is what a good ESPC project would do for you. So someone like us goes in, looks at all those categories, look at where you're spending money, look at where you plan to spend money, find the opportunities, and find a way to cut that expense, that annual expense, and guarantee the difference. Watch out for that. That's it right there. That's in a nutshell what ESCOs want to do for you. What are you spending now? How do we cut it, guarantee the difference with facility improvements or operational improvements? The trick, the kind of next trick is how do you pay for it in a manner that creates not only a project that pays for itself, but also could create some positive cash flow. So many, many times, we'll find the savings, comfortable to guarantee it, but how do we build a real strong finance package around the project you want to do using public debt instruments and those low rates and high leverage terms? How do we get you in a position to where you can take advantage of those guaranteed savings that pay for the project in a way that's beneficial financially? This is really a financial transaction for you guys. You're already spending this money. How can we reinvest it and then take advantage of public financing and the law that says the guaranteed savings is revenue and pay for that manner? We have a whole department dedicated to finance just because that part of the equation is so important. We can all tell you about the savings, and you guys have savings opportunities, but what's the best package, including the financing, that puts you in a better financial position by doing the project? Talked about this already some. This is the law. It's the Arkansas Energy Performance Contracting Law. It's administered by the Arkansas Energy Office. I encourage you to reach out to them as you consider an RFQ. That can be very beneficial third-party resource to kind of walk you through these projects, through the law, through the market, through the companies that are in the market. You can get a lot of information from them. In fact, you can go through the program with them if you want. But regardless, they're going to talk about these things. You can long-term, low-interest finance these projects, much like you would another capital project. But the risk, because the savings are guaranteed by ESCO, is deferred to us. So at the end of the year, you either get the savings or you get the savings. Right? If we tell you it's going to save $1 million a year, I'm just throwing that out there, and it doesn't, then we write a check to make up the difference. So you get the savings. And it's also treated as revenue neutral. So because they're guaranteed, you don't have to go find a new tax. You don't have to go raise revenue in the public to do a capital project. The money that is guaranteed to be saved is used for the financing of the project. It's really important you get involved with someone who can give you a lot of options here, who can give you different scopes, that get different savings, that come with different finance packages, so you can really weigh out how the project's going to perform, not only from a savings standpoint, but financially. It's got a very standard process, and you guys are considering getting into this process. But it starts with a request for qualifications. You're very smart to think about it from this standpoint. Hey, we know we probably have a project. We don't know how big it is. We don't know how much it's going to save. But we know we want to partner up with someone who can explore your project options and come back to you with kind of a menu of things that you can do. And that's done through the investment grade audit. You land on a project. That project gets implemented. It's commissioned. That makes sure that it's operating the way we said it would, because we're guaranteeing it. And then in measurement and verification. Per the law, you get 1 year of that. You can get more if you want, but that's where we true it up to make sure that what we said you were going to save, you're saving. Very standard process. This comes from the AEO. Any ESCO and any way you guys do this will follow this standard process.
Rick?
Yep.
Step 6, measurement verification. You said you can get more. I'm going to guess that's a step 3, right? That's when you
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Originally it was 2. They actually pared it down to 1 to kind of streamline projects, but that is totally your call. How long do you want to know? And typically we like a multiple year deal, 2 to 3 tops. It gives you multiple seasons, multiple operating conditions, gives you a few years to look at performance, but really after 2 to 3 years, it's going to do what it does. And any changes would be due to changes you guys made, like maybe you added a facility or changed the use of a facility or changed something in the original project that is now not there. So why pay for ongoing reports, essentially, if you don't need them? So, but yeah, you're 100% right, negotiating the contract. So let's talk about you guys real quick. I'm not going to pretend to know what your project is tonight. Nobody really should. We haven't seen enough. And we've looked. We've been through your facilities. We visited with the mayor on what he liked to get out of something like this. And we've looked at your energy and water bills. We know what you spend. It's about $250,000 a year in utilities as the city. We don't know about maintenance. We know you got opportunities in maintenance. Most, if not all, cities do. And then capital cost avoidance, again, that's a conversation. What are you guys looking to do in the future from an infrastructure standpoint, and can this project help? Ball field maintenance is something we'd want to get into. How much you guys spending there? Equipment, personnel, water, etc. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Again, we talked about fleet management. Maybe there's a better way to do that. You've got a bunch of other categories because you're a city and you have different building types and the way they're used. You got a bunch of categories that should be investigated, and that's what the RFQ will allow you to do. Talked about your spend. There it is, 253. From a utility standpoint, it's all electric really for you guys, which means things like lights, things like HVAC, and things like solar from a utility-only standpoint are going to make sense for you to get utility savings. Pumps, yep. Energy, yep. And you obviously got the water and the wastewater treatment plant. You got plenty of pumps. But again, that's just one of the buckets when you guys do the RFQ and when you select the entity that works with you, they're going to explore the other buckets too, and they're going to come up with a project that can save in all the buckets and get you that project in a way that it pays for itself. Here's just some high level. Again, you know, it's reasonable to expect this kind of savings from a utility standpoint. Anywhere from 50 to 100 to cut it in half. We could cut the electric bill in half pretty easily with a solar project and some other upgrades. When you translate that over the 20-year life of the project, that's anywhere from $1 million to $2.5 million in utility-only savings. So that kind of gives you a feel for the juice that's in that squeeze, right? This project's got to pay for itself in 20 years. If you only did it with the electric bill, that's about the size of the project it could be, right? You start adding in those buckets and you start looking for other savings measures, then the value of project you can do goes up because there's more savings to be guaranteed. Very high level. Don't put anything to that other than that. From a utility bill standpoint, you have some opportunity. There's value in going through the RFQ because of this. You know there's something there. You don't know what it is. You don't know how big it is. You don't know how much more you would do. But if you can cut an over $200,000 electric bill in half, there's something to be looked at there. You have it now.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
If you're okay with it.
Just internally. Yeah, well, he's downloaded them, so I think you can share them. Yeah, you can share them. I mean,
I'll print off copies.
you guys know this is preliminary. We're not.
We're on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello, YouTube. But here's some other benefits to going through these projects. This is stuff that a lot of folks have gotten out of it beyond the obvious of the savings, which is why you want to do it. But positive press. You're already spending this money. It's not new money. The checks get written to the utilities, to the maintenance guys. You're already making plans to spend money on capital projects. This is just looking at how you're spending money now and reinvesting it. So it tells a really good story, responsible, fiscal story. A lot of these projects are kind of forward-thinking, depending on the technologies incorporated, solar being kind of one that you guys will want to explore as part of this. But really positive press, positive message to the community. And then for a city, talk about things like economic development. We can use local subcontractors in these projects. There's jobs, there's projects to be here. There's a typical city project that employs or can employ city folks. So there's economic development to this as well as improving the public facilities. Talked about pumps. You can optimize the controls. You can improve the performance. You can improve safety a lot of times in comfort, indoor conditions with these projects, depending on how far you go. Obviously, cutting costs. All those buckets we talked about, you're cutting costs. If you want to talk about things like carbon footprint, some cities are into that, but you are saving in other ways, not to mention the money. And then hedge against inflation. As rates go up or as maintenance costs go up and the price of stuff that goes into your buildings goes up, if you're more efficient, you're creating more savings. You won't need to use as much of that stuff. You won't need to you never buy a ballast again, you do an LED retrofit, right? You get those pumps working right, you don't have to buy pumps for a long time. Price pumps go up. You hedge against that kind of stuff. It looks cool too. You guys got one going up right down the road over here. But this would be kind of something we would envision. This is over in Batesville right now, but this is something we would envision. And when you talk about energy savings, there's a lot you can do that people won't see. There's a lot of improvements you can make that unless we're telling that story and not really grasp. You do solar, people see that. So it's easier to tell that story when that's out there. And it's definitely part of the mix for you guys. It's something for you guys to consider. You can partner up with entities like the school. You can partner up with entities like the county. You can look for ways to grow this project from a community perspective. You can grow the scale of it. But the visual of some of this stuff is pretty powerful too. So for y'all, again, going back to that, you're obviously considering this. We think it's very much worthwhile based on the limited information we have on your facilities. It's a selection based on the qualifications of the folks who are responding. So what projects have they done in the past? Where have they done work? What are their references? You know, a whole host. How do they deliver a project? A whole host of information you ask for, but there is no price because you don't know what you're buying yet. What you're signing up for is that partner who's going to dig through all those buckets and find you some savings and find you different projects that are going to create those savings. And that's that investment grade audit. That's once you sign, once you select off the RFQ, that's what your partner is going to do. They're going to do the IGA, and it's about a 3-month duration. It could be a little longer if we get more in depth, but it's to deliver you this host of options. Here's all the things you can do, city, based on what you're spending in all those buckets. What would you like to do? And it could be really big and comprehensive. It could be really simple, low cost. But ultimately, you're going to get a ton of information on your facilities and how you operate them, how you spend your money already, and ways that you can redo all of that. There is a cost to that typically. The state of Arkansas has a cost scale, which is depending on square footage. But ultimately, that's somewhat negotiable. You know, when you want to pick a partner, you say, all right, partner, go through every single bucket I have. Look through everything we got. Come up with whatever you can. Get creative. The fee for that might tick up a little. If you say, look at lights and solar, that fee's obviously going to tick down. It's very streamlined, basic scope. So you guys, once you pick your partner, you're going to want to, that's that EPC first part of that negotiation is how much is this IGA, what's the scope, what's the deliverables out of it, and what will you pay if you do nothing. And that's important. That fee you negotiate is going to release that entity to go do all this work for you. And when they come back and they show you all the options, if you say we don't want anything, we're going to keep all this information, thank you very much, then that fee that you negotiated is what's due. Otherwise, it's in the project. So you get all that information if you only pick one small project or if you go do everything you possibly could. That
So
fee is in there.
If we do the audit and we don't do a project, it's just information and we're wasting money.
I don't think you're wasting money because, frankly, I think it's more valuable than the fee you're going to pay for it because it's a lot about your facilities and how you operate them and how you can upgrade them. I mean, you're going to get scopes. I mean, technically, you could take these scopes and go bid them yourself. That's how thorough the project will be. And it'll have savings attached to it, and it'll tell you what, if you did this here, it would save you this. So there's a bunch of value in it, but typically at that point, you're looking at that value and going, let's do this project. Right. So that's normally what happens. But if you don't do anything, then you would owe that fee. And you don't get billed that fee while it's happening. You know, there's no invoicing. Hey, we've done a month of our work, pay us. There's nothing. We do all this work, come back, say, here's all the things you can do, and you pick.
If we do the project, then all that's included in the savings, and we don't pay any of it.
That's right.
It's all wrapped up into the
100%. Yep.
Okay, if it's done privately, is that guarantee this audit, does it become part of the capital that's appreciated by the private company, or is it ours?
What do you mean if it's done privately?
Well, okay, I think I've answered my own question.
Okay.
I'm thinking about solar farm.
Yes.
With this, that's our study, and we own it.
Yes.
And it becomes capitalized within the.
So let's say you only do the solar, which is the no-cost option. We've talked to you guys about this, right? Technically, you would still pay that fee even though you only did the solar and never paid any money. It's rolled into the cost of that project. So you never come out of pocket for anything related. You get all the information outside of solar, but you chose solar, so you can do solar and not pay for anything. Yes. So it's a pretty smart way to do it. But that's the IGA. Then that would be the next step after selection. I did put this up. It's for the mayor too. These are some really good third-party resources to talk to. I mentioned the Arkansas Energy Office, Chet Howland. Some cities go through the energy office, so they go call Chet Howland and say, hey, we want to do this energy project. We want to do it with you. You walk us through it. And they have RFQs. They have a whole process. They're your advocate. They make sure the RFQ goes out right. They vet the responses. They advise you through the selection process. And they're there on the back end to verify that the project being presented is legitimate, that you can, enter it in this contract. There's a fee for that, up to $30,000. But it's definitely worth the fee. If you guys want to pay that, just know that's in the cost. Regardless, Chet will answer questions for you if you don't go through this. If you just want to call him, ask him about how this works, ask him about cities that have done it, ask him about companies that are doing it. Chet's a good one. Jason Carter's a really good one too. He works with the Arkansas Municipal Power Association. He's a lawyer. He's out of North Little Rock. He's been looking at the solar really, really hard. And he's been looking at it from a municipal standpoint, making sure the cities are getting into these deals and are protected and are getting into smart deals.
Is he the city attorney for North Little Rock?
Yeah. Yep. Good resource for understanding this solar option from a municipal standpoint. And Katie Niebaum with the Arkansas Energy Office, she's been heavily involved in not only the solar law, but the energy performance contracting law. She represents the industry, but she can definitely give you some kind of unbiased advice on how these projects work, who's done them, companies that are doing it, et cetera. I think that's all I got. There's got to be a couple more questions.
You guys basically make your money off the spread. The difference is what we would save and what we're paying now for.
So we don't share any savings with you. Your savings are your savings. We get paid like a contractor. We're a design build energy savings contractor. So we have all the engineering that'll go in and find you all the savings and work up the scopes, and then we have just like if you hire a general contractor to implement a new building for you, to build a new building, that's what we do. So we get paid just like a construction project. And that's what these are at the end of the day. They become construction projects. And you get to decide how extensive the scope is and what you do and where you do it, based on the savings.
So on a solar project, you wouldn't resell that solar to Energy?
No, that's a net metering transaction that Entergy automatically does because of the law. You make it, it gets put on the grid in your name, and it reduces retail kilowatt hours. So we don't do that transaction. It's done by law.
So that's not part of the calculations in the savings and the project and all that?
What?
The amount of money we would save, or actually the cost that would be reduced by that transaction you just described?
That's a solar service agreement. It's absolutely part of this. And you will get to see what that looks like. Yep. Okay. Yep, that's that option you were talking about. If we only did that, and that would be an option, yes. And that's just trading kilowatt hours from your current retail price to a lower price. That's all you're doing. You're not affecting the way the buildings use energy. You're just paying less for the energy.
There's a spread in the
Yep.
difference.
Yep.
Or making money in between.
We make money to build it, so you make money in between. That's how you're making money. We make because we can build cheap solar and sell you power cheaper than you're buying it now. That's how we make money, amongst other things.
Do we have a timeline? Is there any timelines on this that, anything that's gonna be going out that if we don't act now, we're gonna be in trouble later?
So good question. A couple things are changing. Entergy rebate structure is changing. That's gonna be new in 2020, and it's too late for you guys to really do anything this year. So any incentives we projected on like lighting or like pumps or HVAC or something like that, those are going to change. We don't know. They haven't told us which direction. It could be better, but hard to know. Yeah. And then the second thing, and we talked about this last time when we were talking solar, is the federal tax credit goes from 30% right now to 26% next year. And that 30% tax credit is how we can build cheap solar facilities for you so you can get cheap power. That switches from 30 to 26, which means we're going to lose 4% value there, which means the rates we would sell you the power at are going to creep up a little bit. Maybe something like 1/10 of a cent. It just depends on how big we end up going with you guys if you do that. That credit steps down from 30 right now to 26% in 2020, 22% in 2021, and then 10% after that. So the solar deal as it stands now, your ability to buy super cheap power at no cost is probably going to get a little bit worse as time goes by because that credit's slowly decreasing.
You used some there I didn't really understand. When you said the rate at which you're gonna sell us power back.
Mm-hmm.
We're buying power from you or from Entergy?
If you do the solar service agreement, okay, if you do the solar service agreement, we fund, build, own, and operate a solar facility. It has a meter in your name. It's a City of Lonoke on it. That meter makes power. All your other meters use power. The power that meter makes is going to consumption off all your other bills at a retail rate at the like 9 cents or whatever you guys pay now. It just erases it. Well, you got to pay us for that production because we're doing it. So you pay us, say something like 4.5, 5 cents, right? So their savings is in the spread of erasing 9-cent power and trading it with 5-cent power.
Okay. Is this a long-term agreement with
Yes.
you? We don't ever own.
You can own it. You can own it.
Technology.
You can own the site. You can own the technology. There's buyouts in the contract, which if you have the ability to do that, it's in your financial benefit to do so, but you don't have to. Ultimately, you can do a long-term deal and just buy cheap power and never pay for it as far as the facility.
If we started this with you, we would be locked in at this rate, and as it got worse over time, as you just described.
Hedge against inflation, yeah. Yeah. We just did 5.1 cents to the city of Bryant for 25 years.
Rick, on that buyout, is that done at a fair market value?
It has to be. That's the law. It has to. We can't even tell you what it's going to be. We have to say that at year 5 or so, depending on when it's put in service, you can purchase it at fair market value. And at that point, it gets appraised. That appraisal is based on the history, production history. How much is it produced compared to what we said it would? And then the production schedule that's left. It's basically like a commercial real estate. You know, how much revenue is this thing going to generate me, and how good has it been doing already? And so we're seeing like 25% reduction in first cost at that buyout, but that's a total estimate. I didn't tell you what it's going to be. Right? But 25% reduction is probably safe to assume. Those are all the things you get in that IGA, though. And that's a really good reason to go through this process, to do a selection, to let someone work this all up, and let you guys decide what you want to do. A lot goes into that.
Thanks, Rick.
Yep.
Okay. We got one more, guys. We got time if you want to ask a few questions, or if you guys want to take a quick 5-minute break, use the bathroom, and then we'll get the other guys in here. It's up to you.
You'll have a come. You'll be taking a shower and be like, I meant to ask that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, you want to just keep that slides?
Well, they're on the drive. Be happy to give you some if you want me to go with that stick back. Let me grab that.
Yeah, that's all I would need.
All right.
Honestly, you can have it. You need some memory?
No, I grab it.
Okay. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. It's good. It's worthwhile.
I think they're going to be able to leave in 5 minutes here. We'll see.
All right, man. Chop all the time. Yeah, man.
Appreciate
That's not their expertise. Yes, sir.
Say,
Yeah,
you know, kind of the loss of person. I can't get on the secure guys. You're the gentleman that got on the secure guys.
And I'm interested in hearing,
See, that's what
you know, what you're talking about, the Arkansas Energy Office, because I don't know if they actually do the RFQ for us, or if they just assist us in that process. But, I mean, I do RFQs at work, I mean, we do that, that's what we, I'm a contracting guy. But the, I don't know the benefit of having the Arkansas Energy Office associated with it. I'd like to hear what they bring to the table before we pay them $30,000 to go through. What we're gonna do, in RFQ, we're gonna go through binders for every submittal and look at what their qualifications are. We're gonna rate them on a scale for this reason or that reason, price hadn't even come into play, this reason, that reason. And we're gonna narrow it down to the top 5, and we're gonna bring in interviews, and they're gonna interview, and we're gonna rate them again to pick one. I'm not sure what the Arkansas Energy Office brings us.
You're doing what you're doing for. You're doing for one guy.
Yeah, yep, that last guy said that. He said that he give you, right?
Well, I think it's worth it.
Yes, sir, it's worth it.
Well,
Last guy.
I wouldn't rule it out till we get much further down. Well, maybe roll with it.
Yes, sir.
But I think time for that, we're very far from the ones for the petition came out here in the next 3 years.
Well, they have to, say the park and grill, but 15 minutes.
They're gonna make money because it's gonna end up being a long-term lease to go through. You know, unless we buy them out, and then they're gonna make money on a real estate transaction, but unless we buy them out, they're gonna make money off this long-term lease.
Well, since somebody's passed my time on that one, and they had to have it around everything.
Yeah, they make money on the lease.
I mean, listening to them talk about how, you know, either we buy them out in 5 to 7 years, and they'll make money back, or if we don't buy them out, it'll just be a long-term lease on the
They
road.
keep making that money.
They'll just keep making money.
All right, here's what I was telling you about. There's a speaker right there that'll get you. So just stay away from that speaker, and maybe this one, the table will get you. But if you carry the microphone over there, it'll light you up. But other than that, your slides,
Kathy,
all you gotta do is roll. Lisa can do that for you. All you gotta do is roll.
I could control it. But, so you just roll forward?
That's capitalism.
But I'll see if you.
But I'd like to see you do not tax the better. I still wanna see street lights with LEDs, and we don't pay somebody for it.
All right, guys, we've got one more presentation. Introduce real quick, Mr. Jay Holstead from McKinstry. And I didn't get your last name, Miss Lisa?
Yeah.
Miss Lisa Loop, okay? Floor's yours, sir. Thank you.
I appreciate y'all having us out tonight for your time. As the mayor said, my name is Jay Holstead with a company called McKinstry. Prior to this, I was with the Entergy programs for the incentives in Arkansas for 4.5 years. So I'm very familiar with that. That's kind of a background. Prior to that, I was doing energy engineering at, well, a bunch of places. Been doing this for about 15 years or so in the energy sector. Lisa works with us, McKinstry. We'll go over kind of a little bit about who we are and what we do in a minute, but let's just jump in and kind of go to an overview of what this is about. Y'all may have heard some of this in the previous presenters, I'm not sure. So if you've seen some of this information, just let me know and I'll yeah, it might be. Okay, so kind of here's a quick agenda. We'll do intro to what the state of Arkansas calls it, Arkansas Energy Performance Contracting. You might also, a lot of times it's just referred to as an ESPC, Energy Savings, or Energy Services Performance Contract, either way. A little bit about the legislation and some of these incentives I mentioned. The preliminary project assessment that we completed for the city a couple months back, and kind of the findings, what we found. Then an interview to who we are, and then next steps. Okay, so as I mentioned, also known as Energy Savings Performance Contract. Through the Energy Office, they serve as a third-party reviewer. We advocate for going through the State Energy Office. There's a lot of benefits for that, but they are a third-party engineering review, and they kind of hold the ESCO's feet to the fire when it comes to M&V, which is measurement and verification. You say it's going to do X, we want to prove that it's doing X and not Y. And so it's a way that, these are guaranteed savings, and that's how we ensure, and the city in this case would ensure that we have your best interests at heart and validate those savings. Again, pre-qualified ESCOs, if you go this route, it's not going to be every Tom, Dick, and Harry responding. It's going to be that pre-qualified, pre-vetted list of providers, these ESCOs. So that's kind of what the AEPC is and how it's defined. In the grand scheme, what is this we're talking about? Guaranteed savings, and it's paid through the utility and operational cost reductions from these upgrades and improvements. So it's a budget neutral approach, meaning you don't have to go out and increase taxes or go do bonds or get some kind of other financial. It's actually paid through the guaranteed savings annually. So it's budget neutral. You'll notice that kind of that inside bullet there, that sub-bullet says, if savings fall short, we, McKinstry, make up for the difference. What that means is, if for some reason we move forward and do a project and say, you're going to save $50,000 a year on your utility spend, and we, through the measurement and verification process, comes back and it was $40,000, we whip out the checkbook and write a $10,000 check to the city. We guarantee it's going to achieve that at a minimum. If it achieves more than that minimum, that's your money. We don't do shared savings. So if you actually pulled in $60,000, that's a win. City gets more money back than what was actually identified. That goes right back to the city, not to us. So we're not sharing in that. No out-of-pocket expenses. Impact on debt ceiling and bonding capacity is moot. It doesn't do that. Again, the tax increases. And there's one single responsible party, and that's McKinstry. What that is referring to is, as opposed to going out and saying, well, we need to do upgrades to HVAC over here, and this building needs upgrades to lighting and maybe some HVAC. So we're going to go out and we're going to do a bid for HVAC, and we're going to hire that company and someone's got to oversee that. And then there's another entity over here doing a lighting job, and there's another entity over here doing a controls upgrade or a pump or something. You're managing lots of spinning plates. Going this route, you're going to have one point of contact that manages the whole process. The financing, the construction, and the validation and engineering of the savings. So that's what that represents. I won't read all this, but some enabling legislation goes back to about 2013. State legislation enacted Act 554, which was the Guaranteed Energy Cost Savings Act. It was amended or updated in 2015 for local governments, for municipalities, your county governments, city governments. It extended that out. And then you see some other codes in here. The big one I want you to point, we'll talk about it on the next page, is Act 460, the Solar Access Act, which just passed this spring. And one of the key things it did was allowed the net metering customer max or limit of 300 kW before it has to go to the Public Service Commission for review. It moved that up to 1 megawatt. So that kind of opened some doors. Cities, municipalities, counties, and even schools to enter into a contract for this, whether it be through a PPA or through the ownership side, being able to do an interconnection up to 1 megawatt as a single entity. So that was a big deal. It kind of, like I said, opened the door to making solar more accessible for Arkansas communities. And then the other bullets on there, again, it had big bipartisan success in our state legislation. You see at the very last bullet there, it passed in the House 83-5 and in the Senate 28-2 votes. So pretty heavy support for this, regardless of whatever the politics are. Yes, sir.
We've heard a couple of times tonight, the up to 1 megawatt prevents you from having to go through the Service Commission process. Is that really a big deal, or is it really just time?
It's partly time, there's cost, and it's also, it has to do with the net metering laws in our state. It's not that you can't do a 2 meg, a 3 megawatt type system, but it gets into a point where it's almost like regulated. You're looked at as like, well, you're now almost like a micro utility. You're generating power that you're putting back onto the grid. And so, in the utilities, political wrangling in the state, you could say, But again, that 300 kW used to be the cap before it had to go through that extra scrutiny. Now it's a megawatt, no questions asked, go hook it up. Now you still got to do interconnection with the utility, and there's agreements involved in that, and there's engineering cost in that. But it allowed it to, like I said, reduce lead time for projects, make it streamline the process by going to a larger size. And a megawatt's pretty decent. For a town this size, that's probably what you likely, we're looking at probably 800 kW to 1,000 kW, which is a megawatt connected to the utility, to the grid. Now, the incentives, and I won't spend all night talking about this. I know I could, but just what's important for y'all to understand is the City Smart offerings. The city government, City of Lonoke, falls under what's called the City Smart bucket of dollars that are offered through Entergy. Very similar to the large commercial and industrial programs. Tiered structure, meaning the more you do, the higher your incentive climbs. And that's referring to measures that you do. Lighting is a measure, HVAC is a measure, building automation, building controls is a measure. So these things, you kind of like rack and stack them and earn more incentives. And they don't all have to be done at one time. They can be spaced out over time. You can do one thing, get incentives for it, and move on. Do something else, you're not only going to get paid a higher incentive for that next thing, they'll retroactively go back and pay you the penny difference on the thing you already did earlier that year or earlier the previous year, in fact. So it's a very generous incentive program, probably the best in the country. And I spent almost 5.5 years doing this, and I saw lots of the programs and rebate programs that states were offering. We've got a huge advantage we need to take and follow here in the state, and the fact that we don't pay a lot for our utilities, which is kind of a double-edged sword. We have low cost of electricity, so they really have to ramp up the incentives to make it pretty lucrative for the customers. Anyway, it can pay up to 100% of the project cost, meaning that measure. If you did lighting and it was it's cost, it really produced a lot of energy savings, it could cap at 100%. I've seen lots of projects do that. There's feasibility study co-funding that pays up to $20,000. That can be applied to investment grade audits. Talking about tonight, that's part of this process, going in and doing a deeper dive, looking at what's available, what are the opportunities, what's the financial aspects of it, what's the payback, quote unquote payback of that. Well, that study has a cost involved. There's feasibility money through the utility, and being in Entergy territory, we would advocate and help file the paperwork to receive those dollars. And then there's other programs like the Cool Saver AC tune-up program for the HVAC systems. Again, I highly recommend looking at that as a first step or a first priority to improve the efficiency and operation of your existing equipment where it makes sense. If you've got something that's on its last legs, 20 years old, and it's obvious it needs to be replaced, that's a different story. But even systems that are at least 1 year old are eligible for the tune-up. And there's a lot more to go in detail and what that involves, and I'm not going into that tonight, but understand it's a fantastic program that can save typically around 22 to 30% on the energy it consumes just by tuning up the systems you have. And it's more than just changing a filter. It's a very detailed diagnostic tune-up on those systems. And it even can involve chillers. It's not just little 5-ton units. And then it's on this page with the Entergy, but there's also CenterPoint gas programs. Again, Clear Result, which is where I came from, that worked on the Entergy programs, also did the CenterPoint gas programs. They pay about, and that's a fixed, it's not an up to, it's 70 cents per therm on custom measures. And yes, they have rebate programs on your boilers or furnaces, water heaters, things like that are gas fired. So we're aware of those and can take full advantage of those for y'all. Okay, so let's move into kind of what we evaluated for the city back in August. There you go, there's a list of the primary buildings we looked at. These are the ones based on our utility billing analysis that we reviewed and said, okay, here are the biggest users, or the ones where we see best potential. So we went out and took a look at all of these facilities, did a walkthrough, and out of that we found these are your kind of the observations we identified as the biggest opportunities for improvement. So some of these, T12 lighting, if you're not familiar, that's old technology. They don't even manufacture T12s or the magnetic ballast for them any longer. You can't go over to Home Depot or Lowe's and buy T12s off the shelf. And if you do find them anywhere, it's usually, it's supply and demand. They're going to be high dollar because there ain't many of them left. They're, in the back warehouse stored, and they come with a premium now. But you don't want that technology. There's much better technology out there. But we noticed T12s, even T8s, and a lot of metal halides. That's your lights that when you turn them on, they're usually in high bays, or they're on exterior lighting or on wall packs around buildings, and they take a while to warm up, and they have to heat up and get that glow, and they're inefficient. LEDs is where it's at, and that's what the incentive programs will pay incentives towards is LEDs. So opportunity in lighting. Obviously the HVAC, we did see older HVAC units, a lot of refrigerant with R22. That's kind of like the T12s. That's an obsolete. In fact, January 1 of next year, federal regulations to refrigerant going to be produced or utilized. If you've got old systems that still have R22 and you continue to use the R22 to recharge the refrigerant in those systems, it's really expensive. It's about $120 to $150 a pound, and it's only going to go up from there because it's a supply and demand thing. It's being phased out. Now would be a good time through this type of approach, through an ESPC type approach, to get the funding to fund these what we call deferred maintenance issues. This is a great way to finance and pay for that. And some water, obviously water fixtures, faucet aerators, shower heads, things like that can be updated. Building envelope, that's your exterior structure, your insulation, your windows and doors and ceiling around windows and doors, your roof, those kinds of things. And then even solar. The community center, these are just some examples. I'm not going to go into great detail. What these red boxes are identifying is this is 2002 unit, so that's unit that was installed when the facility was built originally. And then the other red box shows a refrigerant that's an R2. And you can see kind of an example. That picture in the center top is, I can't think of the gentleman's name, starts with an M, that runs the facility out there. Mike. I was going to say it's either Mike or Mark. I remember we were talking to him. He has a program on his cell phone he can bring up and see some of the zones that are tied to this wireless system. But the problem is, in a lot of cases, Wi-Fi is not working so great out there. And he said that's kind of it's nice, but then again, if it doesn't work, I'm still building, having to go to individual thermostats and adjust set points and temperatures. So again, there's opportunities to improve the controls technologies for these buildings and make everything on the same application. Okay, police station, similar. Some halogen incandescents. We've got, that's a U-lamp T12. That's that fat bulb I was just talking about, obsolete. So some opportunities there in the police and in the jail. Fire station. All of those lights, I know you can't tell from the photo, but where the fire trucks are housed out there in the room, in the garage, those are all T12s. There was a lot of T12s in this building. Older thermostats. So opportunity there. And then I realize the ball complex, that concession stand's going down, a new one's coming in, we get that. But just kind of some general ideas of the conditions out there. The ball field lights themselves, I counted, I actually lost count when I was going through, but I was up to about 82, I think, light heads, and they're all metal halides. Again, that zzz, warm, and they just consume so much energy. 89. Okay, I got around 82 to 84, and I was like, there might have been 4 more over there I missed, but yeah, thank you. I knew there was a bunch of them out there. Okay, so what was the result out of this? Well, this is what we found. Now, understand that the 250, that's what we've discussed. That is all in utility spend. So you'll have gas, you have water usage, although I know that might not be billed for the water directly or have to fund that as part of the capital, but 250 is utility cost. What we feel is that there's at least 110 to about 120,000 that are directly tied to the operations of buildings, HVAC, lighting that y'all have direct control over. So if you take about a 20 to 25% reduction that we think is very feasible, you're looking at 40 to 60,000 a year in utility spend savings off the utility cost. In an ESPC, an average is 15 to 20 years of its life cycle for that financial term or the financing terms. What that results in is about a $600,000 to $1.2 million project that can be funded through the guaranteed savings that will be achieved. Based on this assessment, like I mentioned earlier, about an 800 kW to a 1 megawatt. So we say let's look at 1 megawatt because legislation allows that to be the cap without going through all those hoops at 100% reduction. So what that means is our mantra is reduce then produce. So rather than a lot of companies that may come in and say, hey, we're going to slap in some solar, let us look at your electric bills. Oh, wow, okay, this is how much you use. So we're going to design a system based on what you currently use, and this is the size system you need, and we'll even do it where you don't own it, we'll own it, and we'll just sell it to you at a discount, but it's based on today's consumption. What we'd rather do is say, what is today's consumption? How can we reduce that consumption, give an opportunity to the systems to the new stuff, better operating, modern technology, fund it through the guaranteed savings, and then based on that, we right-size a solar system that meets the balance, the rest. And so that 100%, what we're saying is post-retrofit. Once you've upgraded and improved the performance of your buildings, then the solar system can be of this size. And now you've offset all of your utility costs. You're paying for the new upgrades with what you save through energy efficiency, and then the balance is covered and the rest with solar. That's how this works through a net metering where you're putting it back on the grid and you're receiving credit on a kilowatt hour versus kilowatt hour basis. Everything you generate, you get that same back at the full rate. That's likely going to change in the future by next summer. I don't have a crystal ball, but we've seen this and we know that that's the way things are happening with the PSC. There's lots of discussions going on right now about tariff rates and utilities, and not trying to throw anyone under the bus. Like I said, I worked on behalf of the Entergy programs, and so there's some good things out there, but they're also looking at it going, wait a second, we're giving credit for a full kilowatt hour that's generated, but there's costs that we incur. It's called LCFC, and that's everything in the utilities world. Lost contributions to fixed cost. It's revenue. So why would we want to pay you $1 for what costs $1.20? We've got overhead. We've got to maintain the grid. We've got to maintain, we got line workers and trucks and over. So we see in the future there's a good chance that what is going to follow what happened in Colorado, and we do a lot of the work in Colorado. Does. We saw the same thing happen there a few years ago. At first it started out as a one-to-one. You put it on the grid, and we'll give you a credit or sell it at the same rate that we charge you for that kilowatt hour. And then over time that got discounted, and the PSC allowed the tariff and the rate schedules to change to say, okay, and I don't know what the percentage is, but it's more like 75 or 80% of value what you put on versus what you get off. Think of it like rollover minutes on the cell phones. We used to have to really worry. I don't think that's such a big deal anymore, but it was, you buy so many minutes, and if you don't use them all, they roll over. But it's kind of a use it or lose it scenario by the end of the year, and you got to start over from scratch. Similar kind of thing. How much you're putting on and the value of it being equal to what you pay. Right now, we're in the sweet spot. It's, for every dollar, you get $1. It's going to be for every dollar you generate, you're going to get 80 cents back. That kind of, think of it like that. So anyway, probably spent too much time on that, but I think, anybody have any questions about this slide? And again, keep in mind, this is preliminary. We're looking at the utility analysis that we did and the facilities that we visited, and we said conservatively at least 20 to 25% savings. Well, that pays down the debt service. So let's say that you finance the project and it's going to be it's a $1 million project. Through those savings, you just do the math, then it pays for that back. Yes, so after 17, 18, 20 years, where do you go from there? You can reevaluate where you are, what's the technology at that time. You've got that new equipment and it's paid for itself over those years, but right, 20 years from now, things won't be the way they are today.
Well, at that point, it belongs to the city?
Oh yeah, well, it belongs to the city from day one. No one's ever going to come out and take your lights or HVAC away. Because
Speaking primarily on the solar piece.
what we are showing you here is an ownership.
Okay.
It's not a, we install it, I mean, that does happen through the construction, but it's not like we're leasing it or renting it to you. We advocate for ownership. Having said that, we can do a PPA or a solar service agreement. It's one and the same. We can do that, and we can structure a plan for that. We feel in the current market, in the current environment we're in, own it. There's a lot of value in owning it. And it's a simple question I ask folks when I go around and talk about this. Does the city own their buildings, or do they lease them? Do you own your vehicle, or do you lease it? Why would you not own it if the rates are correct, that exchange rate I was talking about is advantageous, and you can see a payback? What we're saying on the solar is probably about a 12 to 17 year payback. It's quicker than a lot of cases. That 15 to 20 is on the ESPC, but on solar, it can actually be a driver. Is there anything you want to add to that about, yeah. The solar is a piece that really makes a lot of the other projects, these upgrades through performance contracting, even more cost effective, more visible. It's a driver.
Are there early buyout options normally, or can be?
We can do that even on ownership, yeah. If you want to pay it down quicker, yes.
Did we hear by law you had to own it for 7 years? We had to pay you off on it for at least 7 years. Did we hear that the other day?
For an ownership or through a lease purchase option?
I don't remember, Jay. I thought it was for
Yeah, I think they can structure it that way, so we could look into that. But I think it depends, kind of depends on the financing company that you choose, and we would help facilitate that. But yeah, sometimes there's a certain minimum number of years that you have to pay, and then you can buy out after that. But that's something that can be negotiated generally, and we'd help you with that, because we, as the company that does this, we don't get any portion of the financing. We just help facilitate it for y'all. So we check out multiple options, rates, and help to get y'all the best rate and buyout schedule that's possible. So.
But then y'all would continue to maintain that solar field, or how would that work?
The way I see it, you have basically, and I'm sure there's more than this, but 3 options on solar. You can do a power purchase agreement where you don't own it. There's a third-party finance, and there's investors. They want to see a return on their investment. They're going to utilize land owned by the city, and it's leased to them at like $1 a year or whatever, right? But they own, operate, maintain it, and they just sell you power at a slightly discounted rate than what you pay the utility company. So you can say that's immediate gratification. We're going to get a couple pennies or a penny off of what we pay now. But you never own it until that contract. It may be a 20 or 25-year term. Understand there's escalation rates in there too. It's not going to be this fixed cost forever. It's just like a utility. In fact, what you're basically doing is you still have your main utility, and now you're paying a second utility. Second option is a lease purchase. You kind of a similar structure, but what's happening is over about a 6-year period, they're taking full accelerated depreciation, taking advantage of the tax incentives that are out there, tax deductions, and then you have a purchase option after that period of time at fair market value. Now, who's to say with that? That could be structured, but again, the investors want to get a return on that, make a profit on what's being sold. And then the third option is you own it outright. It's paid for through the guaranteed savings. You own it, and then, yes, the city would maintain it. But it's not, I think we were talking about this today. We're doing this, and you'll see some case studies. We're working with Howard County, we're working with Sebastian County, and in both of those cases, they are owning the solar. They're not doing a power purchase agreement. The list that they use for their kind of like the maintenance, there's 6 bullets. And it's basically maintain a clean surface without using any chemicals or detergent or anything that's going to adversely impact the solar panels and their performance. And you can use water, but even be limited on that, and it's maybe like once a year to make sure there's just not dust or debris buildup. They go in and you maybe once a year have an electrician do a thermal scan to make sure all the connections, there's no hot spots, and that everything's still got good circuits. And that's about it. Maintain the area around it. Weed eaters, goats, I don't know. And that's it. It's really low maintenance. Now, if you have a tracking system, which there's economies of scale, I mean, there's, I think we've talked about tracking systems. Okay, now you've got some gears and mechanisms that may have to be, maintain the lube and grease to make sure that those gears are working. But again, a fixed rack system is this thing in the world. It's just a panel sitting on a rack with a little wire connection and a couple of inverters. It's not a high maintenance thing. Well, yeah, we can. I'm not saying we're fixed on one thing. It's just we'll look at all the options to see what's available. Will it be a power purchase, a lease purchase, or flat out ownership? What's that? Well, yeah. Right. We will facilitate the financing. So again, there's options. If the city says we want to do whatever it may be, and there's financing involved, maybe they have an idea. I say city has an idea of who you've used in the past, or you have some options of banks or lenders that you would prefer to work with. We'll work with them. We also have access to the financing. We've got a national presence. We have buying power. We're vendor neutral, so we don't have a McKinstry solar panel. We work with, there's a bunch of companies. I know recently it's been, I think out of Ohio, there's a company that we use primarily for the solar panels or the racking systems. So again, we have buying power because of our size and our capabilities. But to answer your question, we do the engineering. We'll design the systems. We stamp and improve. But we do use vendors and subcontractors. We'll work with subcontractors locally if it makes sense, if it's cost effective. So we always look at who's local in the region or in the state, but our reach is pretty broad as far as our company. We've been doing this for quite a while. So again, I hate to throw out like kind of this fallback answer, but there's options, and we would look at that through the IGA, through this project development process, to identify what makes the most sense financially and long-term for the city. We don't come and try to force one answer. It's really a partnership, and that's the way we approach things. We want to be a partner. And not just a contractor that's here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing. Because if you think about this, and I've shared this too, embarking on something like this is not like bidding out even a construction of some new building. You have an architect who designs it, a contractor builds it, and maybe there's a year warranty once it's done. It's maybe a year project at the most to construct it. And then after that warranty, you're done. They go about their business, you go about yours, and that chip's over. This is 15 to 20 years. I think you want to make sure that who you're working with is going to be a strong partner and is reliable for the long term. Yes, ma'am.
So I think another benefit, or something we do a little bit differently, is that we do, to your point, we do a kind of an open book. People use this term a lot. Book pricing scenario. So we would get bids from different installers, different solar panel, different equipment, and we would show all of that to you. Now we would be serving as the general contractor, if that's what you want to call it. We're responsible for the overall outcome, but you're able to see where all your dollars go. We've heard our customers say, well, wow, we didn't know we'd get this level of detail, but we'll show you the installation costs, the overhead, the profit. It's different than a lot of the other companies that do it, and it's something that we're really proud of, because We think that gives the cities and counties the best deals, so there's no hidden things. So we forgot to bring it, we were gonna bring examples of our, we show you the bids, we show you all of that and say, here's our recommendation. But then you could also say, well, you know what, we like this company better, they're local, whatever it may be. So we do work to make sure that that's all very transparent.
I second that, and we didn't bring it because I figured we're not going to have time to go through that tonight. But the fact is, we literally receive bids, and we share those bids with the customer. You know, HVAC contractor A, HVAC contractor B, and C. Their actual pricing on their letterhead. We open that up and show you everything. So it's not just wordsmithing. This is just one potential. This is hey, look, if we were to decide we did a helioscope, one of the things I wanted to point out, and I know that there may be some other options for this property that would be better suited than that solar, but I wanted to just point out, this is water. There are pumps. You could design this system to actually be connected behind the meter and reduce demand. That's another cost that no one really talks about, because everything on a PPA or even just a net meter, it's an aggregate kind of a net metering connection to the grid. It's not like you're putting in a solar panel that's directly impacting this building. If you locate solar on this site, you absolutely could. And those pumps have peak demand during the day when they're pumping that water, that you're going to reduce demand cost as well as you're offsetting your usage. So it's KW and KWH in that kind of scenario. Again, I'm not saying that that's the answer. We would look at all the options, but that's one thing to consider. I think we're doing that at Howard. Well, actually, we're talking with one of the cities in Howard County, the city, and one of the things that they're looking at for their water plant. Anyway, this just shows kind of like where that other solar field's going in and where this site is I was just talking about, and the visual impact, I think, from an economic standpoint, to drive business and people into the community. If you're driving down the highway and you see a solar field on your left, and then about a half mile down you see the one on the right. I mean, I don't think if there's another town in Arkansas that's going to have, you know, a community of 5,000 people that's going to have two large solar, or potentially could, on that same route, right in the middle of the heart of town there. So, something. Okay, so who are we? Established in 1960. We've been in business for, 60 years? 600 million in annual revenue, about 2,200 employees, vendor neutral. Again, we're not looking to put a McKinstry light bulb in your buildings. We don't have a brand that we stick a thermostat on the wall that's got McKinstry on it. We're vendor neutral. We represent what is value for the customer. And then again, we just talked about the open book pricing. But, you know, it's a family-owned private business, but very successful. Started as like a plumbing and piping company back in 1960. So we're not like some big publicly traded New York Stock Exchange, but a very large national presence. We have a lot of experience doing this. I'll probably have to run through these a little bit quicker. We're down to like 3 minutes here. 350 million bonding capacity. Again, average about 20 years in the industry on our team. A lot of engineers, managers. And then the projects, our priorities align with one set of a client, meaning not representing some vendor or some distributor and putting their interest ahead of yours. We're focused on one client, and that's our customer. That's the city of Lonoke. People first, do a lot of outreach. One thing I'm pretty proud of is 8 to 10% of all hires are veterans. Strong community outreach and working with the public, doing a lot of nonprofit work. Around the country, about 192 municipalities, and that's just energy projects. Again, McKinstry's a big company. We do a lot of construction, design, build, ground up. We do a lot of building operation, maintenance, service type contracts. We do energy services, meaning commissioning, retro commissioning, controls, things like that. But just in the energy market alone, 192 municipalities around the country. A couple of case studies where we're working right now. This Howard County is under construction. It's happening as we speak. 100% off net zero through putting in a ground-mounted solar that they own. So again, it's that two-step process. First reduce, then produce. We're doing energy upgrades. Their courthouse are going to a variable refrigerant volume system for their HVAC. I don't want to go into all the details about that, but a really nice HVAC system. They have an aging chiller, an aging boiler from like the early 70s. That's all being replaced. It's being funded 100% through the guarantee, and they're offsetting all their consumption with solar, and they're going to own it. And then Sebastian County, sorry. Another one that's actually, we're in a phase 2. We did a first phase with them. They wanted to focus on performance contracts, energy savings first. Let's put solar off for a little bit. Let's focus on the energy reduction first. And we did. It came out better than what was anticipated. They're seeing even more savings and value from that first phase. Now we're entering into the second phase, which is a 2 megawatt solar facility again that they. It's not through a lease agreement or a power purchase service type agreement. Okay, so what we see as the next steps, if you want to initiate a procurement process, you can follow the RFP, RFQ through the Energy Office. That's one avenue. Again, we are proponents of that. We think that's a good idea, and there's lots of reasons why and benefits to that. You can go through TIPS. We're a TIPS contractor. Or you can do your standard bid solicitation. You wanted to put something out in the paper, whatever your normal channels are, kind of put it on the street. You want to pursue that, get the procurement process initiated. You go through, make your selection, and then move to the investment grade audit, IGA. And that is where the rubber meets the road, sharpen the pencil, deeper dive, identify the scopes of work, the guarantees, the financing, what rebates and incentives are available, lump sum pricing. Also in that phase, you'll determine the M&V or measurement verification terms and methodology. When it's through the State Energy Office, they define that. The AEO sets the fee for an IGA. That's another benefit for them. So they say you get X amount per square foot. It's 20 cents a square foot. That's what you're committed to. So no one's going to come out and say, well, you owe us 80 grand to do this IGA, this an audit. You go to the Energy Office, they set that. IGA is absorbed into the total project, so you're not writing a check. It gets rolled right into the project finance. And but if the city of Lonoke did that whole process and decided, we're not going to do it right now, maybe some other day, or we're going to consider other options and go a different direction, then there is a cost for IGA. And again, it's what the Energy Office says it can't exceed. And then feasibility funding can help offset that IGA. Yes, right here, the last bullet. That's what I was saying. The feasibility study co-funding can help fund that towards the IGA. And again, if you recall on a much previous slide, the feasibility co-funding pays up to 20 grand for those kinds of studies for these type of projects. So I think that's it. Y'all have any questions?
So are you in Little Rock?
I'm in Little Rock, yes, sir. I'm from Arkansas. I got 3 kids. I'm also an officer with the Army Corps of Engineers with the State Military Department. I've been doing that for many years. So yes, I'm in Little Rock. We have an office here in Arkansas. But we are nationwide, like you saw on the map. We do projects all over the country and have for about 60 years. And our strength is energy engineering and performance contracting.
Lisa, thank you. Jay, I appreciate you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate y'all's time.
Same thing, guys. I don't take it lightly asking you to show up for 2 hours for a working session, and I appreciate it. If you didn't learn anything tonight, we learned a lot of money to be saved over the course of 10, 15, 20 years, and I think it's well worth the time we spent here tonight. So a lot of questions I know you probably still have. We'll get them answered, but as we move next, I wanted the council to have a working knowledge of what we're going to be asking for, and I want the Budget and Finance Committee and the guys volunteering on the 2022 infrastructure team to really understand what we're getting into as we delve into the particulars. So.
I think tonight was really cool. I mean, they're all clearly making a sales pitch, although now is not the time for the sales pitch. This is really just
This was educational tonight. The reason the 3 companies were here tonight is because they're the ones who courted the city. They walked in and said, I'd like you to know what we do. And
we do RFQ, do maybe 15.
There may be 15 companies that show up, and then that's what.
We're not deciding that.
Nope.
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 3 different. You have different
All right. Well, again, you guys have a great evening, and I appreciate your time.